Hello everybody and welcome back to the United Stand and welcome to the B&B show live from the Manchester studio. We have Ben Jacobs live, everyone.
We've been promising this for so long here we are.
We are. It's crazy to see you in person. You know, you actually exist, Ben. It's nice to see you.
Apparently I am not AI, contrary to what the chat may think.
Exactly. And how are you feeling in Manchester? You liking it so far?
Yeah, it's raining, to be honest. I got back this morning from the Winter Olympics, which I can now say, and I was up in the mountains in a place called Cortina and then down in central Milan, watching a bit of curling as well, which I think I'd be quite good at. And then straight on a plane up to Manchester. And now here with you.
Exactly, and I can't wait to get into all things Manchester United. We're going to be talking about the wage restructuring. We're going to be talking about the new financial implications and what that means. We're going to be talking about transfers for the summer and get your questions into Ben as well. Let's get into all things Manchester United news related and transfer news related. And if you're new around here, Ben Jacobs, journalist, transfer expert. We have him on the show every Thursday. And I'm very happy to be joined with you today. So
yeah, a bit
let's
of a
get
surprise
into it.
this. We were going to do it digitally at 2 and then 3 hours later, here we are.
Exactly, and I can't wait to get into it. But getting in there straight away, Ben, I want to talk a little bit about the financial changes at Manchester United, but also the new financial changes come the summer. Manchester United have restructured the wages slowly but surely, and also there's going to be new financial changes in the summer. How do you see this looking for Manchester United moving forward in terms of the wages that they'll be offering, but also budgets going into the summer with that financial restructuring?
Yeah, I think as far as the wage bill is concerned, Manchester United have always been incentive driven. So what clubs like Chelsea are doing that seems innovative, United have always done. It's just during the Sir Alex Ferguson era, nobody really spoke about it because it was like a default that they were winning silverware and playing in the Champions League. So this protection of without Champions League football, the wage bill goes down, and with it, it obviously gets topped back up. And other incentive-driven things are actually more a brainchild of the Glazers. And as a consequence, although work has been done on the wage structure to sort of cap the top earning, the actual mechanism for how you can earn more or less has always been there at the football club, which is very positive because it means in making these changes, they've got to get away clearly from players just sitting there on big wages. They don't want a Jadon Sancho type scenario where someone's on 300k or more and not integral to the football club. But Jim Ratcliffe, in running the sports department, is actually building on the Glazer foundations and this mechanism to protect the club financially when it's not doing well and to reward players when they are performing. To an extent, it's always been there. With the financial results, the positive is obviously that they're making more of an operational profit compared to this time last year. And that is an indication of some of the cost cutting. And we know that one of the headline numbers was this figure in excess of 30 million compared to only about 3 million. So if they continue along those lines, they can obviously make more money. And that will have a bearing as far as squad cost ratio is concerned. The downside, and we can't ignore it, is the debt. And it's at a record 1.3 billion. And as they lower the wage bill and invest in the playing squad and hopefully get Champions League football season on season, we have to understand from this ownership where the plan is to chip away at the debt. Because it's one thing saying effectively we've got a credit card and because we're bringing in more money, we're going to keep spending money on the playing side. And that does, to an extent, silence the noise if you're winning things. But if you're not paying off the credit card debt, if you're not addressing the debt itself, then Manchester United is still never going to be sustainable. So the two figures in the financial results can be spun each way. Positive, if they continue to make money, the cost cutting can work and they can be on a more solid financial footing. But the negative is obviously the debt simply cannot keep rising. Otherwise, Manchester United are never going to succeed financially or maybe even in football terms in the long run. And then with squad cost ratio, we've said it on many shows before, there's more rope to work with. There's also a buffer year. So as it gets transitioned in from PSR, you have the ability in that first year to take a bit more liberties and effectively, and I'm not going to bore everybody, but go over the green line, which is this 85% starting point of being able to spend your total revenue on transfer fees, on agent fees, and on wages. And usually under this new model, if you go above it, you hit a red line number. And if you end up going above that percentage, you get a penalty. But in the first year, you could breach the green line and be okay. But that's countered by the fact that if Manchester United are in the Champions League or any European football, they've got to abide by the 70% number of financial fair play. So let's see whether they take a liberty in the first year of this new financial domestic Premier League rules, or whether actually they're more conservative, knowing that they've still got to abide by financial fair play. But in short, the only thing that fans listening want to hear, the new financial rules from Manchester United's perspective are better than the old ones.
Interesting stuff. I mean, hopefully that means a good summer. I mean, speaking of the summer, I mean, Manchester United, it's looking now at this point in the season, they went 4 for 4 last summer in terms of Sonny Lamans, Brian Mbeumo, Matthias Cunha and Benjamin Sesko. I'm just forgetting Benjamin Sesko.
Can't believe you forgot him.
I know, he's the one that's
making
on fire.
all the headlines.
Exactly. So a lot of fans are very, very happy with the recruitment, and INEOS have had a bit of stick off the fan base for certain things maybe not going as smoothly and not being what Manchester United fans first thought when they first came into the football club. But I think they are getting a lot of praise right now for the change in recruitment, because that was notoriously poor before they came in. This summer was obviously very, very good in terms of the recruits that we got in. You never expected to have a 100% hit rate, but so far, and it is only a short period of time, it literally does look like Manchester United had an 100% hit rate in terms of their signings from the summer. And I was saying recently, I want to do what we did in terms of the attack for the midfield this summer. Look at the Premier League proven quality of Brian Mbeumo and Cunha. That has helped Sesko settle in, and they've come in and done brilliantly. We know United are going to go big on the midfield. So to sort of tie that in with the wage structure that Manchester United have and are trying to bring down, my concern, and I think it's a few Manchester United fans' concerns, is Elliot Anderson is going to be hot property in the summer.
Yeah.
We've spoken about him being a top target for Manchester United, but he will also be a top target for other clubs, Manchester City being one. If Manchester City can offer him a higher wage than what Manchester United can, say if they go and offer him 250 grand a week, how does Manchester United deal with that when they're trying to compete with the top teams, which is an area Manchester United should be in, but without breaking their wage structure?
Yeah, it's a good question, but the answer is it's Manchester United, and several players don't care about the wage alone when it's Manchester United, especially if it's accompanied by Champions League football. And my expectation is that Manchester United, like Chelsea and like Liverpool, will stick to this model, which might not please every fan, but ultimately it is more sustainable. And if you look now at football, we're not in an era where Roman Abramovich's Chelsea and of course this current Manchester City are going head to head and just outspending everybody. Arsenal put down serious money over the summer, and so did Liverpool, but still in a really disciplined and strict way with the pitch to the player. So if Manchester United remove themselves from the £350,000 a week club or more, barring exceptions when maybe you get a world-class player, there's not actually that many teams doing what Manchester City currently have with their wage structure. And as a consequence, Man United backing off actually removes the competition where there's several other teams that can match the kind of wage that you mention. So if a player like Mark Guéhi wants to go to Manchester City in January, that will be a financially driven decision, coupled with the hope that that project can get instant silverware. And in that scenario, Liverpool's perspective will be fine. You either wait for us and fit into our wage structure, as in Guéhi's case he was prepared to do over the summer, or alternatively, you go to Manchester City and you cash in. So I think the answer to your question is, if a player only wants money and Manchester City are up against Manchester United, then it will be difficult for Manchester United to get that player. But you'd be surprised at how few players are only thinking about the money. And let's not forget that the wage at Manchester United is still really good. And this is why when you get a player or a profile like Matthias Cunha or Brian Mbeumo, they're not looking at the finances. They're saying, I want to join this historic club. I want to restore it to its glory. And my understanding with Elliot Anderson is that he falls into that category. That's not to say he only wants Manchester United or that he's going to pick Manchester United. It will get taken out of context on social media. But Elliot Anderson...
No, that never happens. What are you on about?
Never. Not from you guys anyway, because you're great. But Elliot Anderson wanted to stay at Newcastle. And he had opportunities to earn more and move away, but he wanted to stay. PSR forced the transfer. Where did he go? Nottingham Forest. Again, he's earning well, but it's not like the money is astronomical. and he has not agitated to date to leave because he's going to assess his options in the summer. Morgan Gibbs-White had the chance to go to Tottenham and is another name we can say is now on the Manchester United radar, and we can come on to that in a second. And again, Nottingham Forest came back to Morgan Gibbs-White when Tottenham thought they triggered the release clause, and they persuaded him to sign a new deal. So there's more examples out there of players that are not just taking the astronomical Manchester City type levels of wage and the historical Manchester United levels of wage. So I expect Manchester United to stick to their structure. And if a player turns around and says it's all about the money and you can't match the money, then Manchester United will move on. But that's not my understanding with Elliot Anderson. He's the kind of character that will make his next decision based on project, not finances.
Come and be the heart of Manchester United midfield for the next decade. I'll pitch to him.
Or Chelsea, or Manchester City.
No, Ben, don't mention
him. Or even
him.
Newcastle if Sandro Tonali leaves, and Bayern Munich are there as well. So it will be a big competition.
Oh, yeah, because he's a boyhood Newcastle fan, isn't he?
Yeah, so there may be an inclination to return.
I mean, I think we can beat Newcastle to another transfer, but then again, if it's your boyhood club, it's a difficult one. Interesting. Get your comments in. Let us know what you're thinking and feeling. In terms of Morgan Gibbs-White, I'm going to put a pin in that, because I made a little TikTok about Morgan Gibbs-White saying I would sign him, and it was very 50-50 in terms of the comment section on whether Manchester United should go and sign Morgan Gibbs-White, which I found very fascinating. So we will talk about it. I know it's got mixed feelings in the fan base. I am absolutely pro. I think he's very, very good player. Underrated, actually, I would say. But whilst we're still on the wage structure, I just want to talk a little bit about Mainoo and Lisandro Martinez. And I want to talk about Mainoo because apparently there's still no contract talks going on. Fans are a little bit worried that another club might offer him, a bigger wage that Manchester United won't match, and whether they could stall. And then Lisandro Martinez as well, because over the last few weeks, there has been multiple links to him and Barcelona. So I wanted to hear if you had any inclination on whether them links are substantial. And he's going into the last year of his contract now. He's probably going to want a bigger wage. If you look at the players around him, De Ligt's on more money than him. He'll look at his importance in the squad. Do you think Manchester United would cash in on the likes of Martinez if there was Barcelona there, or do you think they would be inclined to higher his wage at 28 years old?
I think they'd be inclined to sit down with him and agree a new deal. That's my understanding, that Manchester United want Lisandro Martinez to stay.
That's good news.
Relatively simple, but it hasn't started yet, that process. You've got Harry Maguire, who is a more urgent contract clarification, and it's been Manchester United that have been delaying that decision. Maguire is actually ready to sign. He's happy to reduce his wage, and the direction of travel there is that Harry Maguire will stay and extend, but it's not done yet. And with Mainoo, there's no fear that somebody else is going to come in, because remember one thing, Mainoo wanted to leave on loan, not permanently. He wanted to go to Napoli because he was unhappy with Ruben Amorim, and he wanted game time in a World Cup year. He's got everything he wants at Manchester United now, but perversely that means that the parties can be patient and wait, because Manchester United don't fear that Mainoo is going to be looking elsewhere during the summer, and Mainoo knows that Manchester United are inclined to offer him a new contract, because if we go back pre-Ruben Amorim, that's what they were speaking about. But what complicates it is that you've got, can we lock down Mainoo, period, and you've got, what do we need to do in the short term? Because his wage has to be upped anyway due to the fact that it doesn't match his squad standing. And that would be the case even if he was a substitute contributing, but he's a starter at the moment. So they have to weigh up, how do we get a long-term deal that the Mainoo side wants? How do we keep him happy in terms of the wage that matches his squad standing? And what is the squad standing? Because a new manager could come in, and there's not actually that much data post-Amorim, other than the fact that his form has been strong so far, so has Manchester United collectively, coupled with the fact that the current manager, Michael Carrick, really likes Mainoo. So there's just a lot of variables at play. Again, like Harry Maguire, the direction of travel is this is a contract extension that will get done. But what takes away the urgency is the fact that Mainoo wants to stay at Manchester United. So they don't need to rush it, because if somebody else comes in, it's highly likely that Mainoo would just use that as leverage and stay anyway. And if nobody else comes in, they can work whether between now and the end of the season or over the summer to get it done. And the last point on all these contracts that I think people don't really always understand is if you are in an open window in January, regardless of circumstances, Amorim departure, a change in favour for a player, you don't tend to have these contract conversations when a window is open because senior people at the club are dealing with other things, and it's a very busy period in terms of fixtures as well, because if you look at this season for Manchester United, it's basically one game a week, and the only time it's been busier though is about mid-December to about mid or late January. So everything gets put on ice, and then we're only really a month on from that. So I'm not surprised that we haven't had a massive amount of clarity yet. But my understanding is that Maguire is more likely to stay than go, that Manchester United and Mainoo are calm about the contract situation, and that will likely get done at some point, because even if it was shorter term than maybe Mainoo wanted, they've got to bump up that wage to match the squad standing, and nothing really to add on Lisandro Martinez yet, other than Manchester United sources are clear that they would like him to stay for longer than the current contract length is.
Good. I would like to keep Lisandro Martinez. I know he's had some problems with injuries, which have been really unfortunate, but I love his leadership. I love his playing style. I think especially since Michael Carrick's come in, and I know that a lot of players have improved under Michael Carrick, but especially under Michael Carrick, I think he's been absolutely outstanding. So I would like him to sign a new deal when that happens.
And as he proved, he can cameo in midfield.
Exactly, he has. And I don't, to be honest, I know there's links to Barcelona. I don't see Barcelona financially doing that deal, but I don't know. Speaking of Barcelona and high wages, we'll talk about Marcus Rashford, because it kind of coincides with two questions I wanted to ask you. I mean, first of all, what is the current situation on Marcus Rashford? Is it looking like Barcelona are going to pay up for him and that he's going to move there? That could really help Manchester United in the summer in terms of pure profit if it's a permanent deal. And with his wage, it's always going to be more difficult to move a player on with a wage like that. Is that another kind of signal that Manchester United are going to have more of a cap on their wage structure?
Possibly, but I actually think Rashford's prepared to drop his wage. He's not prepared to return to Manchester United and drop his wage, because the position is clear, not just from the football staff, but the hierarchy have decided, and Ruben Amorim was obviously a part of this as well, that Rashford doesn't, regardless of form, have a future at Manchester United. And even if they U-turned on that under a new manager, Rashford has decided he only wants Barcelona. And the more Rashford says, I'm only going to Barcelona on his current wage, Barcelona feel the weaker the Manchester United position becomes, because the last thing they'll want is no agreement and then Marcus Rashford back at Manchester United. But it's chicken and egg, because Manchester United feel like Barcelona are trying every trick in the book now, and then eventually will pay what is a highly reasonable, not just okay, but incredible value for money, 30 million euros in the current market for a player that has been excellent for Barcelona. So situation is Manchester United as of now, pay up or shut up. And then from Barcelona's point of view, they've been holding meetings even this week, I'm told, about is there any way of giving Manchester United what they want, but with a different structure. So their starting point was, when I revealed it on TalkSport exclusively in the early part of January, to hold a meeting and say, could you do it for 20, 25 million euros effectively? And they were given a short and sharp answer that there's no chance. And you'd expect that so early from the summer, when you've actually got to try and get a deal done. But then they came back and said, what about a second loan? Whereby effectively you can get your 30 million, but we're sort of paying it in different ways with another loan fee, and then some kind of end of 2026, 27 season payment that therefore spreads the cost as far as Barcelona are concerned, while still keeping the wage off the books as far as Manchester United's position is concerned. And again, they got the same answer from Manchester United. So it's a standoff at the moment. But my feeling is that one way or another, come summer, Marcus Rashford will be a Barcelona player, and it will be a big surprise if he was reintegrated to Manchester United or another club came calling.
Hard bargainers, aren't they? Barcelona, hard bargainers.
Hard finances, I think, is probably more accurate. I mean, they'll try a lot of tricks, as they do in transfers. We've seen this several times. As a journalist, Barcelona, you always have to pay respect to them, but they're very difficult to deal with, because some clubs, you have well-placed sources and you're like, they're in the room And if they tell me something that happened in the room, my history dealing with those sources says it's accurate information. Other sources, and I'm not saying Barcelona specifically because I think that would be unfair, but other more political clubs, such as Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG, you've got so many people in the room, and sometimes you've got senior decision makers that are outside the room, but highly influential. So you get a bit more smoke and mirrors. So we have to be very cautious because Barcelona right now, sources are saying very clearly, we're going to sign Rashford, but we're going to find a deal outside of the 30 million euros. But it wouldn't remotely surprise me if Man United just do the simple thing, radio silence, and keep reiterating if directly asked it's 30 million euros. It would not remotely surprise me if when we get to the summer, that's just exactly what Barcelona do and trigger the option to buy, because you can't steer away from the fact that it's fantastic value for money given Rashford's influence on this Barcelona team and his form. And the market is so inflated at the moment that for a player of his calibre, that for me is a far better deal for Barcelona than it is for Manchester United.
I agree. I think even with the structure that is already in place, if they trigger that 30 million euros, that is still a very, very good deal. I think that is very good value for money. I mean, speaking of tips and tricks, Keil Robinson's just put a super chat in and said, can a swap deal be done for a Barca player?
Yeah, we sort of discussed this, didn't we? I think it was Bolde in the past. Man United are not looking at that either. So there might be some kind of narrative from Barca because they're trying to find every single way possible to do this deal for under the 30 million euros. But that's Joan Laporta, by the way. He's tough to deal with. He's got a legal background and he is not afraid to try liberties, which will be seen externally as mind games or tricks, but internally it's just hard negotiation. You would actually want a lot of the people at Barcelona to be acting in that way because they're fighting for every penny. And obviously Manchester United's approach is a little bit different still in the market. They're fighting for every penny by doing job cuts and reducing the responsibilities of the ambassadors and sustaining the club as best they can strategically. But if you look in the market, they paid the Cunha release clause. They paid over 70 million for Brian Mbeumo. Quite a big fee for Sene Lammens, despite the fact he's highly rated, especially because goalkeepers don't go always for the same as outfield players. And they were in a massive battle with Newcastle, so they had to pay a big fee for Benjamin Sesko. That's not the Barcelona way. Luckily for Manchester United, we're not going to be talking as much about the fees because all those players are doing exceptional. And if you overpay, and it's a very logical strategy, you can have your signing just grow into the price tag. Same for Chelsea and Moises Caicedo. It gets derided at the time, but as long as the player grows into or surpasses the price tag, nobody cares if you overpay a little bit. The problem is when you overpay and then the player doesn't succeed. So the Manchester United way is to make cuts everywhere, but not really in their valuation of incoming signings at this point. There's not many deals that they've just walked away from. The Barca way is to say, maybe because their finances are relatively tricky, we're going to scrounge, we're going to fight, we're going to do everything we can by the book, but effectively smoke and mirrors to try and get the best possible deal, including sometimes using their local media. And let's see if at the end of it, it works. Because to be honest with you, Barcelona tend to also find a way to get the kind of deals that they're looking for eventually. So they've got Rashford, and that is leverage, because my understanding is that he's going to turn around and say, I'm only joining Barcelona, so it's Man United and Barcelona's problem to find a solution. But as I said before, Manchester United are perfectly entitled to stick to this 30 million euros valuation, because on paper as of now, it's excellent value for money.
Interesting stuff. Let's see who wins that battle. Manchester United. It's going to be an interesting summer ahead. I mean, I want to move on to transfer targets for the summer. We've got some targets to revisit that we've spoken about in the past, but I want to talk about a new target, and that is Morgan Gibbs-White. It was reported within the last few days that he's now on Manchester United's radar, and a likelihood he could leave Forest in the summer. Already got our eye on one Forest player in Elliot Anderson. How interested are Manchester United in Morgan Gibbs-White?
Yeah, they're more interested in Elliot Anderson than Morgan Gibbs-White, but Gibbs-White has been discussed as well in a transfer, I'm told, that is driven by Jason Wilcox. But Jason Wilcox's job is to take thousands of meetings and explore where there's market opportunities. And of course, were Nottingham Forest to go down, there may be market opportunities there. So you would want Manchester United to be holding these conversations. Morgan Gibbs-White, profile-wise, is reasonably similar to some of the players that they've got. And as I've said before, instead of thinking about all these names, because Man United will be linked with loads of names, because they're the kind of club, again, that because of some of the transfer fees they've paid, it helps agents and clubs to say Man United are in there, because it can raise the price and the level of competitive tension. But if we take a step back, they are looking for a defined, rigid 6, and they are looking for an engine room midfielder, but they've got a lot of 10s. So that engine room midfielder will be more in the profile of an Enzo Fernandez that maybe started their career as a 6, moved to an 8, and can play as a 10. Or someone like Declan Rice that was a DM and basically became a central midfielder or an attacking midfielder. So Elliot Anderson falls into one kind of category, and there's other names out there that, again, are perhaps more perfect fits. But if they go big on one of the names, an Elliot Anderson, a Carlos Baleba, etc., then they may have to think, depending on if they do or don't get Champions League football, is there a more economical or value for money type player? And I think a lot of clubs will be chasing after Morgan Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson if, for example, Nottingham Forest go down. So the long list of midfielders is down to the fact that they want to sign 2 elite names, even with Kobbie Mainoo now part of this midfield and seemingly integral. And that, of course, is because Casemiro is going. I think that the same amount of midfield outgoings will happen. It's just that Manuel Ugarte was kind of liked by Ruben Amorim as a squad player, and Kobbie Mainoo wasn't. So it looked more likely that they would lose Mainoo on loan if he got his way at one point in time. And then Casemiro departs, and there's a question mark over Bruno Fernandes. Now Mainoo will stay, at least in my opinion, and sign a new deal. But Ugarte has a question mark, and Ajax and Lazio, I can tell you, are 2 clubs that are interested in him. And Besiktas made an inquiry as well towards the back end of the January transfer window. So Ugarte could be another one out the door. So there's still scope to sign.
Do you think Mason Mount has any opportunity of leaving? Sorry to interrupt you there. I just was thinking
it's a good question.
He's like a forward / midfielder, but I mean, I rate him so highly as a player, but I mean, if you can't take the car out the garage, then what's the point of having it?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
I mean, I know I don't normally say this, but the short and honest answer is I don't know. And the reason why I don't know is because Mason Mount was loved by Ruben Amorim. So there was a 0% chance of Mason Mount being forced out, even with Cunha and Mbeumo arriving, and even if under Amorim, Bruno Fernandes had been restored to his more familiar role. Amorim loved Mason Mount. Obviously, the change to Michael Carrick is interesting. One, because it might be temporary. So we'd have to understand whether a new manager favours Mason Mount as much as Ruben Amorim. But the second point is that Carrick has restored Bruno Fernandes into a role of freedom because Kobbie Mainoo has come in, and even though Casemiro is leaving, he's still got a regular amount of game time. So Mount has been one of the, in inverted commas, losers of Michael Carrick replacing Ruben Amorim. Not because Carrick doesn't like Mason Mounts, but just because there's heavy competition there, there's been a system change, and Amorim was really team Mason Mount. So I think the jury's out until a new manager comes in, but I'm not aware that there's any plans at this stage to sell Mason Mount. The priority has been about keeping him fit and consistent, and he was kind of getting to that point under Ruben Amorim, but as I say, under Michael Carrick, it may well be a different story. But I don't think that will change how they look at recruitment. They've got enough central, versatile attackers because Bruno Fernandes could still stay. I think that's one that we're going to learn about a little bit later down the line. And as we've said on many shows, Cunha and Mbeumo can play centrally, they can go out wide. So I think when we look at Manchester United, we're talking about a central engine room midfielder, maybe a kind of metronome even, that has creative skills, but doesn't necessarily naturally burst into the 10 role in the same way that some of the other players we've spoken about do, more like a Declan Rice. They can, and they will contribute, but they've come from a more disciplined background. And then an out-and-out 6 that will be really rigid and defined and also pull all the strings. Then left wing back and very possibly left winger, and depending on the Joshua Zirkzee situation and the pathway for Chido Obi, a number 9 as well. So this is what Manchester United are looking at. And I'll reiterate what I've said on many shows, which seems to be quite widely reported now. So maybe we can claim this as another United stand first, but Manchester United are going to have a big summer, with or without Champions League football. That's the feeling in the industry. That's the feeling, speaking to sources, that even if they didn't get Champions League football, this is going to be a massive summer of recruitment for Manchester United. And maybe one of the reasons why they feel they can do that with or without Champions League football is because those domestic financial rules are changing.
Well, you talk about a versatile sort of midfielder there, and that sort of brings me on to my next point, because I think this guy fits the bill. I mean, both of them do really. So I want to take it Bundesliga for a second.
Yeah.
Angelo Stiller of Stuttgart and then Felix Nmecha from Borussia Dortmund. They're both profiles that are quite versatile midfielders and have been linked to Manchester United. Is there strong links in that?
Yeah, Nmecha was discussed, but they haven't made an approach. And as far as I'm aware, it was scouting, not necessarily advancing. It's really easy as a journalist to sort of say, these are the players that have been scouted. But again, probably 5,000 players ahead of the summit in Manchester United's global network will be scouted. It's just something that you do. Somebody actually once told me that, on these dating apps, not that I use them, you do the sort of swipe thing and probably people are going through hundreds. Someone said the best way of comparing scouting to the reality of if you're going to make a move is imagine if all these names just came up on one of these dating apps. You'd just be swiping through hundreds.
That's a great analogy.
And that doesn't actually mean that you're going to do that much with it. And the ones that you sort of reject, the only real difference is instead of it just being a swipe, to reject them, you might actually have to go and watch a couple of games.
And then go on a few dates.
Oh yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because then if that club wants to sell that player and a Man United scout attends, even if they walk away and go terrible first date or whatever, the club might go, Man United, we're here. And then it finds itself in the media and you're like, wow, genuine target. But that's not always the case. So the really clever scouts, I won't name names or clubs, and who knows, maybe one of these clubs is Manchester United, but it would be exposing what they do. So this is just a little aside before we come on to the two names and the question that you actually asked. You know that I love a tangent on this show. So the really clever scouts, they don't go in the director's box. They don't get official accreditation. They don't make it known they're there. Believe it or not, they sit in the away fans because the feeling amongst senior people at many clubs, particularly in scouting departments, is if you're in the away end, everyone around you is hardcore. Everyone around you is well informed. And how the fans react is just as valuable to the scout. Do they like that player? Do they support that player? What happens when they lose the ball? What's the first touch like? And actually listen to the everyday fan that's more of a hardcore away attendee, and they do their scouting report in a covert way away from the director's box, which is why several clubs sometimes just pull a signing out of nowhere because they were never seen in kind of official circles. So Nmecha scouted, but it doesn't mean a massive deal, to be perfectly honest with you. Angelo Stiller, we know, is a name that was put forward by Christopher Vivell, and after Dan Ashworth left, he obviously got more standing. He was only temporary at the football club, and now he's the director of recruitment. I don't get the impression at this stage that Manchester United are advancing on Angelo Stiller. I'm told they're waiting to see whether Stuttgart remove the release clause, and Stuttgart have the ability to pay €2 million and get rid of the release clause entirely. If that's going to happen, my information is that it needs to occur by the beginning of April. Otherwise, the ability for Stuttgart to cancel the release clause just by making a payment disappears. So once we get more clarity as to whether this is a market value release clause or whether it's a free-for-all and a bidding war, only then I think will we know whether Manchester United are going to move. But I think there are higher targets because the Cunha and Bumo point that you made is really important. And it was actually an Amorim point, by the way. So even though Amorim might not have been everyone's cup of tea, the one thing Amorim said is go and get me proven Premier League experience. And that didn't just extend to Mbumo and Cunha. I'm not saying he was against Benjamin Sesko or Sene Lamens, and they're both doing well now. But Amorim's perspective was my dream four is Emi Martinez, Cunha, Mbumo, and Ollie Watkins, because he just wanted the whole squad littered with proven Premier League experience. And although they're not going to be that glib in how they look at who is and who isn't a target, because there's way more finesse. Proven Premier League experience, as well as lowering the average age of the squad, are still part of the mantra of how they are looking at recruitment. And that's why I feel Stiller is a target and more concrete than Nmecha, but not necessarily at this stage as high as others on the list of options for the midfield.
I think going for Premier League proven is a good thing, I'm going to be honest. Like I said, I don't think every single signing has to come from the Premier League.
Yeah.
There's been multiple players, several players, more than several players that come from outside the Premier League that have just been absolutely fantastic. I mean, look at Erling Haaland at Man City. I know he's an absolute robot, but players do come from other leagues and do fantastically well. However, there is a proven track record of players coming from the Premier League, maybe from lower sides, adjusting quicker and making a very big impact. I mean, you could name so many names. Van Dijk, coming from Southampton. You have Sadio Mane. You have Semenyo going to Man City. Mark Gahey going to Man City. I mean, the list could just go on and on. You could name Cunha and you can name Mbeumo. You can name so many players. And I think when you're trying to rebuild a midfield, and it has to be signings that come in straight away, making impact, and have to be top quality players, going for that Premier League proven experience like an Elliot Anderson or potentially a Lisandro Tonali could massively benefit Manchester United. And I just want to touch on that because I know Tonali is linked to multiple different clubs. What's sort of the domino effect of that? And also Anthony Gordon as well. He's been mentioned a few times. I know more of he's a winger option, but a Newcastle target that is seemingly on the market considering multiple clubs being linked to him.
I think Gordon would be open to being on the market. I think Newcastle may take a slightly more militant position. They obviously won't want to lose Gordon and Tonali. And my information is that Nick Woltemade could actually be sold in the summer, and that might be something mutual, because even though he started with an amazing flurry of goals and had better form than Alexander Isak when he was fit, there's a possibility that Nick Woltemade is looking for personal rather than football reasons for a move away from Newcastle and very possibly England as well. So,
doesn't fancy it over here.
It's just cold up in Newcastle. By the way, great place, amazing fan base, brilliant stadium, and I'm up in Edinburgh, so I love Newcastle. I've not got a bad word to say about Newcastle or Greggs that you can get up there, but it's not everyone's cup of tea, and some people don't acclimatise to English football. So let's wait and see what happens there. It's certainly not definite he goes, but once again, Newcastle United's potential outgoings could be intertwined. The advantage of Gordon, which is why Manchester United have at least discussed him, is he can play wide, but also go into that number 9 role. And people don't realise how much Gordon enjoys being a main lead striker, even though we don't see that much of him playing through the centre. And one of the reasons is, of course, because Alexander Isak was so good in that position. So let's see what happens with Gordon. There's certainly other clubs, and plenty of them. Arsenal, for example, have looked in the past. And I think with Tonali, my information is actually that, again, taking the money or particular projects out of it, there may be a personal desire for him to return to Italy.
Can I just ask on that, what Italian clubs will be able to afford his transfer fee?
Well, it just depends, because the transfer fee can be offset with amortisation. In addition, any Italian club that gets Champions League football will be able to have one big incoming. And like with Harry Kane when he left Tottenham, maybe at the end of the day, if it just suits all parties, the deal for a club outside of England could be different for a club in England. Remember, Manchester United went for Harry Kane, and Daniel Levy said it's well over £100 million, which was at that point going to be a British transfer record or thereabouts. The payment terms were very favourable to Tottenham and difficult for Manchester United. So they never made any kind of approach formally for Harry Kane, because Levy outlined the terms, and rightly so. Manchester United backed off because it was a waste of time. And then Bayern come in, and according to Bayern sources at least, the fixed fee for Harry Kane is somewhere around 80 to 85 million. And at that number, Manchester United might have tried to do the deal as well. And Kane was very open to leaving Spurs for Manchester United, but it was two different deals. So we'll have to understand that as well, whether or not actually it's a better deal for Tonali financially for a Serie A club. Sometimes that happens. It's far too early to really tell. But I think there will be interest from Serie A, and Tonali is definitely open to a move back to Italy. Manchester United have discussed Tonali as well. You've got Man City and Arsenal. So to your point about how City always replicate Manchester United, there's a bit of overlap there. But I think it's really Arsenal. And my feeling is that this is a deal that Arsenal would be prepared to advance and explore quite seriously if Tonali opens the door and says, I want to leave Newcastle and I'm prepared to stay in England. So that's going to be a bit of a battle as well. But unlike Elliot Anderson, that might, under certain circumstances, become a bidding war, I wouldn't discount suitors for Tonali if he indicates he wants to go back to Italy, backing off, and then maybe an Italian club having a clearer run to negotiate with Newcastle if a departure is going to be sanctioned. And it's a big if, because the Tonali side are exploring a lot of deals. But we have to respect Ross Wilson, the excellent, relatively new Newcastle United sporting director. And if Wilson doesn't want to sell Sandro Tonali, it's not going to be an Alexander Isak situation, according to my information. However hard the player pushes, it won't border on boycotting or freezing himself out. Because one thing that's different between Tonali and Isak is that Tonali is hugely grateful for his time at Newcastle. He's massively in debt in many ways to how they dealt with the ban. They stuck by him. They quietly extended Tonali's contract when he was still banned for those breaches of the gambling rules. And Tonali's not forgotten that. So I think his personality won't be to force his way out of Newcastle United, but there is a concrete possibility that he still leaves St James's Park this summer for whatever the right kind of money is. And based on Tonali's form, you would say that fee is going to be 100 million, if not more.
Yeah, I think he's a quality player. I really do. Elliot Anderson is still my top target.
And Manchester United's top target.
Yeah, which is a good thing. So we're on the same wavelength there. I mean, people in the comments might say they shouldn't listen to me, but no, I do very much like Elliot Anderson. But Tonali is a top quality player. There's a lot of good Premier League players. I mean, I really like Kamara from Aston Villa. I think he's fantastic, but I know he's not really been linked at all to Manchester United. One that I wanted to ask you about was Adam Wharton. Is he sort of slipped down the pecking order for Manchester United?
Not necessarily, because Elliot Anderson's really interesting how you define him. And I think
different
Anderson,
profiles.
Yeah, and Anderson kind of falls into that Declan Rice fluid player that, depending on coach and system, could be asked to take on a defensive role, but could be given quite a lot of freedom. In the last 18 months at West Ham, Rice was given that freedom and he suddenly added goal contributions to his game, and it kind of continued at Arsenal, but he gets asked to play in different roles depending on the formation. If Odegaard is fit, Eze's there as well. But there's definitely periods at Arsenal where Rice looks much more attacking, and there's certainly periods now at Chelsea where Enzo Fernandez has more freedom, whereas at Benfica, he was a number 6. So Anderson can be shaped into what you like and could have those goal contributions and could be given more freedom to do less defensive work and push forwards. And if that's the sort of chemistry you're looking for, then somebody like Adam Wharton could also be signed, because, as you say, they're different kind of profiles. So I'm not led to believe that Adam Wharton has actually dropped down in Manchester United's thinking. It's more the Wharton situation needs to be clarified first with his current club, because he could actually still sign a new deal and then be taken off the market for the summer in the same way that Semenyo was.
Highly doubt he'll do that.
You never know.
Based on the situation Palace are in, but you do never know.
New managers coming in, they could, in theory, not through the league, but through European football, get some kind of European football next season, where it would specifically be the Europa League. They'd have to win the UEFA Europa Conference League. Premier League is nosediving, but naturally some of that is probably down to the departures that they've had, coupled with Oliver Glasner saying that he's leaving. But Steve Parish has been adamant for a long, long period of time that he wants to agree a new deal and maybe open the door instead for the player to leave in summer 2027.
Maybe have a Semenyo sort of release clause potentially.
I mean, Palace don't tend to agree to that, but if you think about one example where they did, which was Michael Elise, Chelsea thought they triggered the clause. Palace said it was illegal the way they'd done it. Chelsea backed off. We never really got to the bottom of exactly what happened. And then suddenly Elise signed a new deal, But it was kind of on that premise that they wouldn't be standing in his way the next time clubs came calling, and he ended up going to Bayern Munich. So maybe there is a situation like that. But generally, Palace don't, and nor do Newcastle, agree to that many release clauses. So we'll have to kind of understand whether a new deal could develop. But from Manchester United's point of view, I'm not led to believe that Wharton has fallen down the pecking order. Of course, Carlos Baleba's still there as well. It's really less about taking these targets now and ordering them, which is really easy to do in the media. And it's more about understanding who the new manager's going to be and where the chemistry is. And I actually think that both midfielders that arrive will be intertwined. So it'll be less about individual names and who they can win the race for, and more about, if we start with Elliot Anderson, who is the best pairing or partner, whether starter or squad player, depending obviously on the Bruno Fernandes and the Kobbie Mainoo situation, but who's the best pairing long term for this football club? And if they get Elliot Anderson, they'll effectively find a pair. If they don't get Elliot Anderson, you have to work out who your next priority target is, and then again think about that pairing and that chemistry. And it's a very underrated thing in recruitment. It's not just about going for a collection of names and saying who are the two that we want in an ideal world. It's about finding the first one you think you can get and then thinking about that pairing and that chemistry.
Interesting stuff. I mean, before we wrap up with the super chats, I can see you guys putting your super chats in. I am going to get to them. Do not worry about that. I just want to ask you a little bit about the fullback area, because touch on the midfield, touch a little bit on the forward line. I mean, I'll sort of intertwine the fullbacks with the winger situation. Left wing is going to be an area that Manchester United look to strengthen. We've spoken about that. Diamonde and Njai both being linked to Manchester United. How strong are them links? And then also, will there be fullback reinforcements? Because I think that's a strong one in the fan base for fullbacks to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Njai isn't your typical like left winger. He can play anywhere, and he loves going central. So that's why I'm led to believe that they're not really pushing on that. And as we've said before, Everton's perspective is the same as Jared Branthwaite. Man United bid multiple times for Jared Branthwaite, and Dan Friedkin and his team said, no, we're not selling. And Everton don't see themselves as a selling club. So I think Njai may look for a move, but I actually am under the impression from Everton sources that he's going to be really difficult to get out of that football club this summer, and they might even offer him improved terms. So that's where we're at with Njai. With Jan Diamande, it's kind of as before, that Leipzig are seen by suitors as grandstanding around 100 million euros, but Leipzig also normally get their price, right? So you've got to respect the Red Bull model, but suitors feel if they wait on Diamande, the price will drop. And Man United are quite serious about Jan Diamande. I think, speaking to sources, there's more substance actually in Jan Diamande to Manchester United or possibly Tottenham than there is with Anthony Gordon to Manchester United.
I like Jan Diamande a lot.
One of the reasons that I think they like Diamande is much like Giovanni Quenda, even though he's not done a great deal of it, they feel he might be able to double up and play as a kind of left wing back too. And if that's the case, you get a 2-for-1. And big appeal for Giovanni Quenda was Chelsea saw Quenda as a left winger, Man United saw Quenda as a left wing back who could play as a left winger equally as comfortably, and if anything has spent more time in that more advanced position. So if they get a 2-for-1 on the left side, and some of the profiles they're looking at, that is the intent. Could somebody play like Nmecha as well, who they tried for, as a left winger and a left wing back? Then their actual out and out specialist fullback signing will actually move and become right-sided. And I'm told there's a very concrete possibility that Manchester United might sign a specialist right back or right wing back, and then a left winger predominant that can drop into the left wing back position if necessary, which also protects the pathway of Diego Leon.
Interesting stuff. I mean, we've not really been linked too much to a right back, so that's good insight and good to hear. I mean, Dallow's
you want Tino Livramento.
I do. Yeah, Ben knows. I mean, Dallow's doing pretty well at the moment, but I think Manchester United need to work off the Arsenal model. You need 2 quality players for each position. I mean, when you were just mentioning Tonali and Arsenal then, I was just thinking, Tonali, Zubimendi and Rice. I mean, wow, that'd just be ridiculous. But United need, top quality players in every single position, and they need a top quality player to sort of fight for that position as well. So
Yeah.
I like the idea of going for a right back. I like the idea of going for a left winger. I really like Yan Diomande. So you're making me very happy right now. But we've got some super chats coming in to the show. By the way, everyone, smash a like on the video. How good is it to have Ben Jacobs in the studio with us?
Even wore a shirt.
I know you took. I mean, I wore a hoodie. I feel like I let the side down. But to be fair, I didn't know you were going to be here until last
until
minute.
about 3 hours ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nor
So
did I, to be fair.
I would have maybe made a little bit more of an effort if I knew you were going to be here in
I don't think the camera
person.
can see because you never see the socks. But those that know me know I always wear a cracking pair of socks. And I don't know if
you can
there's
get
like
it up if you want.
a wide shot, but my socks are always A-game socks.
Can we see that, guys?
Stronger than the jumper.
Adam, can we see it? Yeah, we can see it. We can see it.
So yeah, the
Love
socks are always good, and sometimes the socks are more outrageous than the choice of woolly jumpers. But I was on my way back from the Winter Olympics and actually went to a place last night at Milan Fashion Week.
Oh, cool.
So I thought I'd better have this on.
Yeah, I like it. Go on, Ben. Make an effort for us. We have Daniel Thompson saying the summer window is just the summer window has to be a home run. Buying quality players is so key, just as key as selling well. I can see Ugarte and Xerxes going. Anderson, Tonali and a third midfielder is my priority. Great show as always. Lol D6Y says, what about Mane? Will he join United? Matthias Mane.
Wolves' Mane,
Yeah.
I actually think Wolves' perspective is that the player will stay. And I don't think Mane is really pushing to depart so early in his career. He's done brilliantly, again, from quite a central position. I know he's been used out wide as well, so most people see him as a wide player. But when he's been most effective for Wolves, he's actually been given freedom to play right behind the striker. And Wolves are very much building a squad with some of their younger players to try and get back up into the Premier League, assuming they don't find a miracle to stay up. So my feeling with Wolves, following the departure of Jeff Shee, is that they'll put quite a lot of roadblocks in the way of Mane going anywhere. And I haven't actually heard that much about links between Mane and Manchester United. Again, a player they're aware of, but really they're looking for somebody a little bit more established at this time. And if you compare Mane's minutes and game time to, say, Diomande, if we are calling Mane a winger over on that left-hand side, then it's fair to say that Diomande has played more elite level football, not just for his club, but for his country as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Manchester United on that side of things. He does look like an exciting player, though.
Very, very talented player. But it reminds me of Tyler Dibbling, where when Jim Ratcliffe first came in, Ratcliffe was making a point, to my knowledge, that we've got to buy young, we've got to lower the average age of the squad, we've got to cut the wage bill, and if possible, you've kind of got to look at British-based talent as well, or homegrown, whatever you want to call it. And then Dibbling was on fire under Russell Martin for the early part of the season, and then they changed managers and he fell out of favour. But at that point, that was the profile that Manchester United were looking at. It was just, as you may remember publicly, Southampton was saying Tyler Dibbling is a £100 million player. And of course, Manchester United were not going to advance anything at that kind of number. So we might see a young, homegrown type talent, but coming back to Mane, which is sort of separate from all of that, I haven't heard that much as far as United are concerned. If anything, it was Everton that were one of the clubs I was told to watch.
Tom McBride says that there are three symbols to why last season was so bad: Onana, Amorim and our attack. Except from Ahmad, I don't want any of them near United again. Tom McBride expressing his feelings in there. Class of
No
9.
chance of Onana.
No.
coming back.
Yeah. Can we just get clarification on that, Ben? Onana, any chance of him returning?
I mean, there's nothing really more to say. It's not that it's ended badly. It's just that, as we said, for several shows before it even happened, Sané Lamens has been brought in as the number one. And any other goalkeeper, if, for example, Bayindir goes, is not going to be an experienced name like Onana, because Onana doesn't want to come in as the number two. And Manchester United view Sané Lamens as the clear number one at this stage. So departure in the summer is going to suit all parties.
Cool. I did assume that would be the case. Class of 99, what's the status on Xerxes? More game time in plans, or will he be sold?
I think there's a fair chance that he'll be sold. Obviously, Xerxes' perspective was that he just wanted to be loaned like Kobbie Mainoo, get minutes ahead of the World Cup. But you can see him falling down the pecking order, not just because Benjamin Sesko looks like he's getting going, but also Brian Mbeumo can lead the line, and so can Matheus Cunha. And my feeling remains what I've said on countless shows, that Chido Obi will still have a pathway into the first team. And in this new Carrick system, the versatility of Xerxes to play behind the striker, even coming on for 20 minutes or so, it's not as powerful or as useful as maybe Ruben Amorim would have viewed it, because I sense, whether under Carrick or a new manager, they stick to their back four. Bruno Fernandes will be in this more advanced role, which means some of the other players like Cunha or Mbeumo have to adapt a little bit. Whereas under Ruben Amorim, if you're using two defined 10s, you can actually make one of them a profile like Joshua Zirkzee, and even if he's playing in the 10 role, he's not really a 10, it's more like a second striker, or it's more like a forward that holds up the ball in a variety of areas. I don't think, if they stick with Carrick's system and philosophy, or if a new manager replicates it, that having that kind of 9, not playing in a 9, is really what they'll be looking for. It will be more pace in wide areas and people that can cross the ball and cut in and finish. And Xerxes not really a winger, or behind the striker will be a creative 10. And again, that's not a bigger forward that holds up the ball. So suddenly Xerxes competing to be a 9 at Manchester United, and there's lots of other options. And this is why there could be a concrete possibility that he's sold during the summer. Still interest from Serie A. Roma were obviously the club pushing the hardest in January. Some formative inquiries, by the way, from Saudi Arabia as well. So that might be one to watch. I'm told that Al Ittihad might be a club to keep an eye on, and they're going to have a very big summer ahead because, of course, after the World Cup, Saudi Arabia are going to be pushing for about 50 foreign signings as they look to do wave 2 of their recruitment. It's just whether Xerxes is prepared to go there, or maybe more likely will hold out for a club in Europe.
Xerxes' profile reminds me of one that would do pretty well at the likes of an Arsenal and the way they play. Look, I'm not saying he's going to sign for Arsenal and anything like that, but they have utilised that sort of profile before, and at Manchester United, like you said, we're just probably, with the way that we're going to be forward with the different manager, we're probably just looking at a different sort of profile. But I really like him, I honestly really do.
Yeah, Leeds, by the way, were a club that made an inquiry about Xerxes, but the wage was just too high, and PSV, another team that wanted him, but they financially could only do a loan, but the pitch was, come back to PSV, you know the country, you're happy there, you speak the language and all of this, and then get yourself in the World Cup squad and you revisit it in the summer. And of course with Man United, I suppose they had this with several of their outgoings as well. But although you could sort of argue you're just getting a striker that wants to play and maybe is falling down the pecking order out of the club, they'll be looking at their books still in this final year of PSR, and they'll be saying, how can we ensure that we don't make a book loss if he's to be sold? And that's why, were he to depart, you would imagine logically that the financial year will close, we'll get after the World Cup whether he's there or not, and then they'll consider the future of Joshua Zirkzee. Firstly, because a new manager could hypothetically come in if the job's not given to Michael Carrick, and second of all because they'd be entering into a new financial year, so they'll be able to be done and dusted with PSR. So I'm not sure we'll get full clarity over Zirkzee early in the summer, stay or go, because I think it's counterintuitive for Manchester United to do a Xerxes outgoing in this financial year.
Thank you for that. Daniel Thompson says, hope you're well and having a good day. Beth, United Stan and Ben, thank you very much, Daniel.
I'm having a good day.
Yeah, having a great day. KG76, would Nagelsmann be interested in the United job, please? JB Sahar, can Ben Jacob and Mark buy the club from Glinios? Oh, they might.
I mean, Mark's got the money. I don't know about me. Could maybe chip in with 0.00001% and Mark can buy the rest.
Yeah. I mean, on the Nagelsmann thing, just we do need to wrap up because Ben's got a train to catch. But thank you everyone for putting
what time is it?
Putting your super chats in, 6:10. So we'll wrap up very quickly. With that, Ben, just a quick manager update overall.
Yeah,
if there's
I got a bit of
to...
Saudi news for you as well to finish with the United States exclusive. But yeah, let's start with the manager situation. I think we're going to repeat a lot of the same things.
That's all
on
good.
many
Just
shows.
a little quick fire wrap up.
So naturally, Michael Carrick could, in theory, play his way into the job. We've known that for quite some time, but it's still probably early to say. Julian Nagelsmann would be interested in a Premier League job, unlike some of the other names. Thomas Tuchel signing a new deal, Carlo Ancelotti extending as well. He is expected to be available as it stands on the market. And another name, actually, that I'm told Manchester United have at least discussed internally, like scouting, we shouldn't get too excited about it, but this is going to be taken out of context on social media. But Roberto Martinez is expected to leave Portugal, and Jose Mourinho might get that job. I don't think the data, the style, the feedback will necessarily push Martinez right up there, but he's definitely been discussed as they create this short list. But Nagelsmann and Roberto De Zerbi, I would expect to be on the Manchester United shortlist. Julian Nagelsmann doesn't really like a big, thorough, long process. He wants people to say his CV speaks for himself. So you tell him he's a leading contender, of course he would interview, but after that you're basically offering him the job. So it's a big sticking point at Chelsea where Nagelsmann met them, thought he pitched very well, and then was a bit upset and bemused why they were then out there speaking to several other candidates, and he just wanted them to tell him the job's yours. So let's see whether he's patient and wants to enter this Manchester United process, but that could definitely be one name to watch, and I think De Zerbi will likely be there as well. But we can't discount Michael Carrick because at the moment he's got the form of a Premier League winning manager, albeit only over a short period of games. And if this was to continue between now and the end of the season, then obviously Michael Carrick will force his way into the equation, even if when he first took the job, the remit was very much only until the end of the season.
I don't know if anyone saw my face, and I think the camera was probably on you because you were speaking when you mentioned Roberto Martinez. I was shocked, very shocked. Wow. In terms of Michael,
I'm not led to believe that it will necessarily develop.
It's a discussion.
But, you know, you've got somebody that has managed a lot of big names, has proven Premier League experience.
Just been recently bigging up Bruno Fernandes.
Exactly. He's calm with how he deals with his day-to-day demeanour. And he's very used to working in quite political environments, and he's quite prepared to not bulldoze in and ask for absolute autonomy. If you sign De Zerbi, I can guarantee you that the model will change a little bit.
Well, that's one I don't think will work either, Ben. Don't worry about that.
To be fair, like I said, I think on previous shows, he worked within a Brighton recruitment model that was very data-led and very specific. It ended in a sort of fiery way, but for much of his time there, he was very on board with how they did business. So we certainly can't say that it would be impossible for De Zerbi to fit into this model, but I do think he would want some more autonomy than certainly Ruben Amorim had, but less autonomy than Erik ten Hag, who of course had a recruitment veto.
Let's see, guys. I think Michael Carrick's doing a fantastic job. Not saying give him the job now, but he's definitely, if he carries on the way he's going, he's going to put himself into the equation. But look, Ben, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone who got your super chats.
I tell you the Saudi news, though, as well.
Oh, gosh, yeah, the Saudi news.
Don't forget the Saudi news.
You're doing my job for me, here. Come on.
I'd broken an exclusive about Riyadh's season and Manchester United and how the aim was originally to bring them out mid-season, but there was obviously so much turmoil in the end and managerial change that nothing developed there. But the Saudi tournament that was part of Riyadh's season, which was always mid-season, is set to be moved to the summer. And the tournament tends to, we'll see if it changes, but generally it involves 3 teams. 1 guest team that comes out for pre-season and 2 Saudi teams. So the way it works is you play both the Saudi teams if you're Man United regardless, and you have like a mini table, although over time they've toyed with the idea of kind of playing a semi-final only against 1 team, and then ultimately the winner goes through to a second game against the second. So in theory, if Man United lost to Cristiano Ronaldo's Al Nassr, then it would be Al Nassr that played Al Hilal in the second game, or vice versa. But generally speaking, it's been a round-robin tournament. My understanding is that Saudi are looking to enhance that tournament and do something bigger over the summer. So you've heard some reports out there, I think already, from very well-respected journalists that have said they could go for pre-season in Saudi Arabia and earn quite a lot of money. I think it was between 10 and 50 million that was reported. I'm told the number is much bigger because the tournament planned is going to be a whole lot bigger. And it's going to be interesting to see whether, because I'm told Turki Al Sheikh, the boxing promoter, is involved, but if they go for it this summer, or whether they actually just try, as has been reported, to get Manchester United out to Saudi Arabia for a regular pre-season where they can control who they play and there's a lot of private training, and then do this big exhibition type tournament in the following summer, because then you're not competing with a World Cup, or if they go all in and do it now. So the information I have is that PSG, which is quite interesting, they've been to Saudi before, but it's obviously Qatar-Saudi politics, they're likely to get an invite. Manchester United are a club that are part of this big, probably 6 to 8 team tournament, depending on how they do it. So one idea is that you stick to 6 teams, you use the old format of the Riyadh season international cup tournament, and you have 2 groups of 3 and then a knockout stage. Another is that you go 8 teams. And like I say, Manchester United and PSG are definitely 2 of the teams that have been considered. Then on top of that, there'll be a minimum of 2 Saudi teams, but my information is there might be 4 Saudi teams, probably, not definitely, but I think logically and likely the PIF controlled ones. So then you obviously get Ronaldo and Benzema definitely involved in the tournament, and 2 more. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the 2 others that they would like are the Champions League reigning champions and the Europa League winners, which would obviously have to be late invites because you wouldn't know the direction of travel, and you might need a contingency plan because if PSG defend their title, then you're 1 team short. So Saudi are going big on a kind of international type tournament. Might be this summer, might be summer 2027, but either way, if it gets off the ground, this is not only about Man United being a part of a regular pre-season that may or may not happen in summer 2026 as others have reported. It might be something a bit more formal and exhibition-y that offers a whole lot more money than the 10 to 15 million that has been reported.
That sounds exciting. I'd want to watch that. I'd tune in. That sounds very, very exciting. Like you said, this year with the World Cup year, it would be
difficult,
competitive and difficult, and especially with the likes of, clubs like Manchester United, PSG, a lot of their players are going to be at the World Cup. Therefore, how do you do that with holidays? And I assume the Saudi Pro League are going to want big names there from each team. I mean, it'll be interesting whether it goes ahead this year or next year, but it is exciting.
Yeah, it'll be late July, early August though, because the weather in the earlier part of pre-season is very tough and difficult to play games in. And obviously you could have a scenario where players are finishing the World Cup as early as the latter part of June. So were you to put on this tournament, but I think
have them back.
The challenge is that the way the calendar works these days, Premier League seasons start a bit earlier with a bit less flexibility due to congestion. So it might be quite difficult, but let's see. Saudi dealmakers are still discussing it, but the information I have is that this would almost be a mini Club World Cup, but the difference is it's like a hybrid of just probably 4 elite teams and 4 Saudi teams in a kind of exhibition face-off. But if it gets off the ground, the money might be quite similar to the Club World Cup, where you would get a starting entry fee of, I'm told, speaking to sources, £30 million or more.
United will be all over it.
Prize money for winning any of your games, and then prize money depending on where you finish. So suddenly, perhaps won't quite be the 85 million or so that Chelsea got for winning the Club World Cup, but it could certainly reach a number in and around 40 million, which is obviously 4 times the kind of numbers that we were speaking about of Man United going to Saudi Arabia as part of the Riyadh Season Cup. And more importantly, you still might only be in Saudi for 10 to 14 days to do all of this. Wow.
Manchester United would absolutely love that money coming into their pockets. And look, I'd enjoy watching it. And if you can get money in that way, and it's interesting to go and see the likes of Manchester United go and play against Saudi Pro League teams. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But look, Ben, thank you so much for your insight. You heard it here first. I'm excited to see how the rest of the footballing world sort of reacts to that. But that'd be a really exciting tournament to be a part of. So Ben, look, thank you so much for coming and joining me in the Manchester studio.
Of course, pleasure. We'll do it again soon.
Absolutely. And by the way, anyone who got the super chat in that I've not seen, I'm going to ask it Ben next week. So make sure you stay tuned because I will be taking pictures and we'll be asking them questions. I've looked and the questions will hold up till next week, some of them that I have missed. So you will get your question asked. You'll have to tune in next Thursday. But Ben, can't wait to speak further. Before I go, very, very quickly, score prediction for Sunday against Crystal Palace.
Manchester United to win 3-0.
Manchester United to win 3-0. Is that what we're going for?
It's all doom and gloom at Palace. So difficult for them to get a result. So Manchester United are the overwhelming favourites, I think. So often it'd be a difficult game, right? But at the moment, I think Palace are on the down, Man United are on the up, so 3-0.
3-0, you heard it here first with Ben Jacobs, 3-0 to Manchester United. I would love to see a nice, comfortable scoreline. That'd be lovely for my Sunday watching. What do you think will happen? But before you go, smash a like on the video, and you've got to know that Liverpool versus West Ham watch-along will be live at 3 p.m. on Saturday with That's Football, so the sister channel to the United Stand, That's Football, Liverpool, West Ham, 3 p.m. on Saturday, and stay right there because after that it's Man City away at Leeds, back-to-back on Saturday on That's Football, so your Saturday is sorted. And then on Sunday, you have countdown to kick-off beginning from the United Stand studio at 12 p.m, so make sure you're there for that. And straight after it, Mark is doing on That's Football the Arsenal versus Chelsea game. So a cracking weekend of football. Make sure you stay tuned for it all. But look, everyone, thank you for joining us at a slightly later time this afternoon. Thank you, Ben, for coming to the studio and giving us all the latest Manchester United insight and transfer news. And thank you to all you for watching. Have a lovely rest of your day.